When you emotionally detach, it isn't because you suddenly became cold, it's because you finally became clear. It's because something inside you got tired of being the only one holding the connection together, tired of translating silence into meaning, tired of calling inconsistency complexity, tired of shrinking your needs so someone else could feel comfortable, and in that moment, you stop begging for love and you start respecting yourself. And that shift is not small, it's seismic, because emotional detachment is not revenge, it's not a performance, it's not you trying to win, it's you quietly choosing to stop losing yourself. They didn't know why your calm felt so loud. They didn't know why your silence felt so heavy. They didn't know why the moment you stopped reaching, everything inside them started trembling. Because for a long time, they believed the connection lived on your side, in your effort, in your forgiveness, in your ability to keep the door open, even when they kept one foot outside it. And when you finally stepped back, they didn't just lose your attention, they lost the script they were depending on. Your calm becomes a mirror they can't look away from, because it's not loud enough to fight, and it's not soft enough to manipulate. It's simply honest. And honesty is terrifying to someone who has spent years surviving by avoiding what they feel. They thought they were safe because they assumed your heart would always reach. They assumed your love would always cover the distance. They assumed you would always be there, even if they showed up halfway, even if they disappeared for days, even if they returned with excuses instead of consistency. And the moment you detach, the mirror turns toward them. And what they see is not just you stepping back, they see themselves, and that is where the fear begins. Because emotional detachment doesn't just remove you from the cycle, it exposes the cycle. It exposes how often they pulled away and called it needing space, how often they withheld affection and called it being stressed, how often they avoided difficult conversations and called it not liking drama, how often they kept you in uncertainty and called it taking it slow. And you, with your empathy, with your patience, with your willingness to understand, you kept translating their avoidance into something kinder. You kept explaining it to yourself so you wouldn't have to face what it was really doing to you. And then one day you stopped translating. You stopped editing your needs. You stopped blaming yourself for wanting basic reassurance. And suddenly, the mirror shows the plain truth. If someone wanted to show up consistently, they would. That mirror is what they can't handle, because a mirror doesn't attack them, it doesn't chase them, it doesn't beg, it simply reflects. Your emotional detachment reflects that you are no longer willing to be the emotional manager of the relationship. You are no longer willing to carry the intimacy for two people. You are no longer willing to keep reopening a wound just because they come back with a smile and a little warmth. You are no longer willing to accept maybe, soon, I don't know, while your heart keeps paying the price of waiting. The mirror reflects that you finally see the pattern. And once you see a pattern clearly, you can't unsee it. And they can feel that change in you. And the reason that change is so powerful is because it is quiet. It doesn't need announcements. It doesn't need threats. It doesn't need dramatic exits. It looks like you not explaining yourself as much. It looks like you not asking for clarity 3 times. It looks like you not apologizing for having feelings. It looks like you not rushing to respond when they finally decide to text. It looks like you choosing your peace even while your heart still remembers them. And they can sense it because they were used to your emotions being available as a bridge, and now the bridge is gone. And they're standing on their side of the river, looking at the distance they created and realizing they might actually have to cross it. This is what the mirror does. It forces them to face what they avoid. They avoided vulnerability, so the mirror shows them loneliness. They avoided commitment, so the mirror shows them instability. They avoided accountability, so the mirror shows them consequences. And the hardest part is, they may not even understand what they're feeling. They may just feel restless, irritated, anxious, like something is off. Because for someone who uses distance as safety, your detachment feels like danger, not because you're harming them, but because you're no longer predictable in the way you once were. You are no longer the person who will always reach, always wait, always forgive, always be available. And unpredictability scares the part of them that was depending on your consistency while offering you none. And I want you to hear this with your whole heart, because if you're the one detaching, You might be grieving at the same time. You might be thinking, why do I feel sad when I'm finally doing the right thing? Why do I miss someone who hurt me? Why does choosing myself feel like loss? And the answer is simple. You're not just letting go of them. You're letting go of the hope you built around them. You're letting go of the future you imagined, the version of them you kept waiting for, the moment you believed would come when they finally realize what you mean to them. And hope can be beautiful, but hope can also be a chain when it keeps you loyal to someone's potential more than their reality. Your detachment breaks that chain, and that is why it's emotional. It's not cold. It's not empty. It's full of feeling. It's full of truth. It's full of the quiet bravery it takes to stop begging for love that should have been offered freely. It's the bravery of saying, I love you, but I love me too. It's the bravery of saying, I can miss you and still not return to what broke me. It's the bravery of saying, I can care about you and still choose what's healthy for me. And when you stand in that bravery, you become a mirror they can't ignore because you are embodying the very thing they struggle with, emotional responsibility. And that mirror can trigger them because it confronts them with a question they don't want to answer. Why can't I show up the way they do? Why do I run when things get real? Why do I shut down when someone loves me? Why do I only feel safe when I have the power to leave? And they might not say those words. They might not even think them consciously, but they will feel them because your detachment removes the distraction of your chasing. And without that distraction, they are left with themselves. And here is the part you need to protect yourself with. The mirror is not your job to hold forever. Your emotional detachment is not a tool to fix them. It is not a strategy to pull them closer. It is not a performance designed to make them regret you. It is a decision to honor your own heart, to stop living in confusion, to stop accepting affection that comes with conditions, to stop giving loyalty to someone who treats closeness like a threat. If the mirror makes them grow, that is their work, not yours. If the mirror makes them reach out, you still get to decide what access they earn. Because your detachment is your boundary, and boundaries are not punishments, they are protections. So if they can't handle your emotional detachment, let them feel that discomfort without rushing to rescue them from it. Let them sit with the consequences of distance without you closing the gap again. Let them wonder what changed without you explaining it in paragraphs. Because what changed is not complicated. What changed is you finally chose yourself, and that choice is sacred. That choice is the beginning of your peace. That choice is the moment you stop being a place someone visits when it's convenient and you become a life that requires consistency to enter. And if they didn't know why your detachment shook them, it's because they finally met the version of you that won't abandon yourself to keep them comfortable. And that version of you is the one who will never again confuse love with losing yourself. When you emotionally detach, it isn't because you suddenly became cold, it's because you finally became clear. It's because something inside you got tired of being the only one holding the connection together, tired of translating silence into meaning, tired of calling inconsistency complexity, tired of shrinking your needs so someone else could feel comfortable, and in that moment, you stop begging for love and you start respecting yourself. And that shift is not small. It's seismic because emotional detachment is not revenge. It's not a performance. It's not you trying to win. It's you quietly choosing to stop losing yourself. They didn't know why your calm felt so loud. They didn't know why your silence felt so heavy. They didn't know why the moment you stopped reaching, everything inside them started trembling. Because for a long time, they believed the connection lived on your side, in your effort, in your forgiveness, in your ability to keep the door open, even when they kept one foot outside it. And when you finally stepped back, they didn't just lose your attention. They lost the script they were depending on. Because an avoidant can handle intensity, they can handle big emotion, they can handle the storm. Because storms are familiar, storms are predictable, storms mean you still care, storms mean you'll come back to fix it, storms mean you'll explain yourself again. Storms mean you'll chase clarity, and as exhausting as that is for you, it can feel strangely safe for them because your intensity still keeps them connected without asking them to fully show up. Your intensity keeps the relationship alive even when they pull away. Your intensity gives them proof that they still matter, even if they aren't being consistent. But your emotional detachment is not a storm, it's the sky after the storm. It's the quiet that happens when you finally accept what you've been avoiding, that you can't talk someone into being ready, you can't love someone into emotional presence, you can't sacrifice your dignity and call it devotion. And when you come to that acceptance, you don't need to argue anymore, you don't need to plead anymore, you don't need to prove anything anymore. You just become still. And that stillness is what they can't handle because stillness gives them nowhere to hide. You see, when you were emotionally attached, they could always tell themselves a story. They could say, they're just emotional, they're just needy, they're overthinking, they're insecure, and that story protected them from having to face the real issue, which is that they were benefiting from your love while avoiding the responsibility of sustaining it. And as long as you kept reacting, they could keep labeling you. And as long as they kept labeling you, they could avoid looking at themselves. But emotional detachment removes your reaction. And when your reaction disappears, the labels stop working because you're not chasing, you're not pleading, you're not spiraling, you're not sending essays, you're not begging for a conversation at midnight, you're not asking for crumbs of reassurance, you're just steady. And that steadiness forces reality to show up because now the only thing left for them to feel is your absence. And that absence doesn't give them an argument to win, it gives them a truth to face. And here's the emotional truth, the one that hurts, the one that makes their chest tighten when they don't understand why. Your detachment feels like rejection to them, even when you're not rejecting them, even when you're simply protecting yourself. Because for many avoidant people, closeness feels risky, but losing closeness feels humiliating. They want distance on their terms. They want space when they choose it. They want the comfort of knowing you're still there, still waiting, still caring, still reachable. And your emotional detachment takes away that comfort, not with punishment, but with consequence. That's why they feel it so intensely, because your detachment is the first time the relationship stops revolving around their nervous system, their timing, their fears, their ability to go cold and come back warm whenever it suits them. And when you detach, you stop arranging your life around their inconsistency. You stop making excuses for their mixed signals. You stop accepting, "I'm not ready," while still offering them the benefits of your loyalty. And suddenly, they are standing in front of something they didn't prepare for, a version of you that isn't trying to persuade them, a version of you that isn't negotiating your needs, a version of you that isn't scared of losing them, because you already lost yourself once and you're not willing to do that again. And what they didn't know, what they truly didn't know, is that your emotional attachment was a kind of emotional insurance policy for them. It softened their guilt. It distracted them from the consequences. It allowed them to keep you close enough to feel desired, but far enough to avoid vulnerability. And that is the perfect setup for someone who fears intimacy, because they get connection without full exposure. They get love without the weight of being fully seen. And you, unknowingly, were making that possible by always being the one to close the distance. So, when you stop closing the distance, it feels like the floor moving under them. They start questioning, why aren't they texting? Why aren't they asking? Why aren't they reacting? Why are they so calm? And the calm scares them, because calm means you've accepted. Calm means you've decided. Calm means you've found your footing without them. And if you can stand without them, then they can no longer rely on the idea that you'll always be there no matter what. And this is where your detachment becomes a mirror, because the mirror doesn't insult them, it doesn't accuse them, it simply reflects back the results of their choices. And reflected results are harder to deny than words, because words can be twisted, but results cannot. And the result is you are no longer emotionally available in the way you used to be. You are no longer reachable through the same old pattern. You are no longer willing to be pulled close and pushed away like a door that swings only when they want it to. And the reason they can't handle it is because they were depending on the old version of you, the version who always explained, the version who always tried, the version who forgave quickly, the version who waited, the version who would rather be half loved than fully alone. And when you become emotionally detached, you become emotionally honest, and honesty changes everything. But I need you to understand, this is not about becoming indifferent. It's about becoming intentional, because detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop abandoning yourself to prove you care. It means you stop letting your heart be used as evidence while your needs are treated like a problem. It means you stop begging for basic consistency and instead you start requiring it. And that is what shakes them because your emotional detachment is a boundary they can't negotiate with charm. They can't soften it with a sweet message. They can't erase it with a brief moment of intensity. Because detachment means you're watching the pattern, not the moment. You're listening to behavior, not excuses. You're choosing peace, not potential. So if they suddenly show up when you detach, if they suddenly reach out when you stop reaching, do not confuse their discomfort with your responsibility. You are not responsible for managing the feelings that come from their own avoidance. You are responsible for protecting the heart you almost lost in the waiting. And if your emotional detachment is what finally makes them feel the weight of losing you, let it, because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop carrying the relationship alone and let the truth be felt by the person who kept refusing to hold it with you. When you emotionally detach, it isn't because you suddenly became cold, it's because you finally became clear. It's because something inside you got tired of being the only one holding the connection together, tired of translating silence into meaning, tired of calling inconsistency complexity, tired of shrinking your needs so someone else could feel comfortable. And in that moment, you stop begging for love and you start respecting yourself. And that shift is not small. It's seismic because emotional detachment is not revenge. It's not a performance. It's not you trying to win. It's you quietly choosing to stop losing yourself. For so long, you were loyal to the hope of what it could become. You were loyal to the few good moments that felt like proof. You were loyal to the version of them you saw when they were soft for 5 minutes and present for one night. And you kept thinking, if I just say it better, if I just stay calmer, if I just give them more space, they'll finally come toward me. But what nobody warns you about is how quickly love turns into self-abandonment when you're the only one fighting for the relationship's breathing. Because the truth is, when one person is always explaining, always reaching, always repairing, always forgiving, they aren't in a partnership. They're in a rescue mission, and rescue missions exhaust the heart. So your detachment begins in a quiet place, not with drama, not with a speech, not with anger, but with a small internal decision that sounds like, I can't do this anymore. Not like this. Not at the cost of my peace. Not at the cost of my dignity. Not at the cost of my identity. And what changes is not just your behavior, it's your energy. Because you stop handing your nervous system over to their unpredictability. You stop making your mood dependent on whether they text. You stop waking up and checking your phone like it's a verdict on your worth. You stop rereading the last message trying to decode whether they still care, and instead you start giving yourself what you kept begging them to give you: clarity, consistency, safety. And that is why it looks like power, because it is, but not the kind of power that hurts, the kind of power that heals, because you're no longer asking someone to choose you while you're actively unchoosing yourself. You're no longer proving your love through suffering. You're no longer negotiating your boundaries just to keep someone from leaving. And in that moment, the dynamic shifts because the avoidant person could handle your emotions when your emotions were still attached to them. They could handle your sadness, your longing, your questions, your "can we talk?" Because all of that meant you were still tethered, you were still invested, you were still available, you were still willing to wait. But your detachment removes the tether, and the most shocking part is how little you have to do for the whole world to change. You don't have to insult them, you don't have to block them, you don't have to throw a fit. You simply stop chasing, and suddenly their distance doesn't feel like strength anymore. It feels like a risk, because your chasing used to soften the consequences of their pulling away. Your hope used to cushion their inconsistency. Your forgiveness used to clean up their mess. Your availability used to make their half-effort feel enough. And when you detach, you stop cushioning them. You stop cleaning up. You stop filling in the blanks. You stop carrying what they refuse to hold. That's why emotional detachment is not cruelty. It's self-respect finally turning into action. And action is the language that an avoidant nervous system understands more than words. Because words can be dismissed, words can be delayed, words can be promised and postponed. But your calm behavior, your steady withdrawal from the cycle, your refusal to chase, that speaks louder than any paragraph you could ever send, and it lands like a reality check they weren't ready for. Because they didn't know your attachment was the thing keeping them comfortable. They didn't know your emotional availability was the safety net under their distancing. They didn't know that every time you reached, you were teaching them, you can disappear, and I will still be here. You can be unclear, and I will still interpret it kindly. You can withhold, and I will still overgive, and you never meant to teach them that. You were just trying to love them. You were trying to be patient. You were trying to be understanding. You were trying to make room for their fear, but love without boundaries becomes permission, and permission becomes a pattern, and patterns become prisons. So when you detach, what they feel is not just missing you, it's losing control of the script, because the script was always they pull away, you come closer, they go silent, you try harder, they give crumbs, you accept it, they return briefly, you feel relief, and the cycle resets. And in that cycle, they never have to confront the weight of what they're doing, because your love absorbs the impact, but emotional detachment stops you from absorbing it, and suddenly the impact hits them. Suddenly the quiet they created is now the quiet they have to sit inside. Suddenly the distance they used as protection becomes the distance that threatens to end the connection entirely. And this is where you need to be gentle with yourself, because detachment can feel like grief, even when it's healthy, because you're not just letting go of them. You're letting go of the version of yourself who believed that if you loved perfectly, you could be loved perfectly back. You're letting go of the fantasy that your patience could heal their fear. You're letting go of the role you played, the fixer, the rescuer, the one who understands, the one who stays. And that version of you might have been loyal, but loyalty without reciprocity is a slow heartbreak. So when you feel yourself detaching and part of you wonders, am I being too harsh? Am I giving up too soon? Am I becoming cold? I want you to hear this. You are not cold. You are finally warm toward yourself. You are finally refusing to burn your life down just to keep someone else comfortable. You are finally realizing that love is not supposed to feel like walking on eggshells. Love is not supposed to feel like waiting for permission to be important. Love is not supposed to feel like you're constantly proving you deserve basic care. And yes, that detachment will shake them because you're no longer reacting the way they expect, you're no longer available the way you used to be, you're no longer easy to keep at a distance while still benefiting from your devotion. And that's why they can't handle it, because your detachment is the first time they experience you as a full person, not as a constant source of reassurance, not as a backup plan, not as a comforting presence they can access without committing to consistency. But here's the part that matters most. Your emotional detachment is not something you do to make them feel pain. It's something you do to stop yourself from living in pain. It's the quiet decision to stop begging for clarity and start requiring it, to stop accepting half love and start demanding real love, to stop returning to the same cycle and start returning to yourself. And if you stay with that decision, if you protect that peace, if you honor that self-respect, you will look back and realize detachment didn't make you lose love. Detachment made you stop losing you.